I think the biggest problem that comes with removing this AI moratorium out of the one big beautiful bill is that it basically allows for states like California and New York that certainly do not have a friendly vision for technology in their future to go and set the national standard for what AI policy is going to look like within the United States. And there are a lot of people that are pro-states' rights, and I certainly am too. I came working in a background with dealing with a lot of state legislatures. But the problem is that, you know, even if a good state is doing great AI policy on that state level there, you know, California is just going to go and override it because they're going to have this overly cumbersome, series of regulations they're going to put on the technology, and it's going to limit their ability to actually meet its full potential. So it was a real unfortunate, thing to have happen. I think that there was some blatant misrepresentation of what exactly was covered by the moratorium, and unfortunately, it got stripped out of the one big beautiful bill here. But, that's just the start of the conversation. If we want to win, there's got to be a lot more work to be done here.
James, it seems to me that seemed to be the overriding theme, that if stuff was, if you were an opponent of something or a proponent of something, if you wanted to outlaw something or you wanted to get something stripped out of a bill, if you just lied about it enough and made it just slightly toxic, it could get stripped out. Now, but this is something that perhaps, certainly Congress could do this on its own. What are the chances of that, and what are the stakes here? Why do they absolutely need to do this? And talk about the threat of China and what they're doing, the innovations that they're doing.
Yeah, I think you kind of just hit it on the head as to why Congress needs to go and act now. It's because the reality is that we're in a global race for leading the global AI ecosystem. Between us and China, realistically, Europe can't really do it. They have the EU AI Act, which is a real ridiculous regulatory regime to the extent that we actually have people in Europe begging for them to pause the enforcement of the AI Act, right? So they're taking themselves out of the equation, and it's China and the United States that are the primary players here, right? And if we... Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, isn't it interesting? We just talked to Stone Washington from CEI about the EU changing their greenhouse gas disclosure rules that they had, and sort of putting the pause for 80% of the folks who were going to file. It's one of these situations in which you realize this stuff, but sometimes you realize it too late. There can't be a too late moment here with regards to this race against China, is there?
Yeah, absolutely. The reality is that if we let the 50-state patchwork problem of regulation go and basically impact AI, we're going to wrap it in so much red tape and different compliance regimes that we're going to slow down the pace of innovation and growth in that sector. And I'll tell you right now, the Chinese are not looking to do that. They're looking to do everything in their power to close the gap that exists between the United States and China. And in the meantime, too, they're leveraging their other initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly to get the rest of the world to utilize their AI ecosystem, right? So it's actually really, really important that the United States does not encumber its AI ecosystem
James,
here.
And we're talking with James Czerniawski. He's a senior policy analyst at Americans for Prosperity. Let's talk about that, because I had this conversation with somebody last weekend, because these are the kinds of conversations I have over the weekend about the problems with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, right? That China goes in and builds this infrastructure and makes it on terms that a host nation can't possibly pay back. So China winds up going in and controlling that infrastructure. If we're talking about AI-driven IT infrastructure around the world that China is building and could take over, there are some real dangers here, understanding the way the Chinese government model works. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I've been talking about for well over a year now, because last year, back in 2023, you had the Chinese Cyberspace Command Administration go and release an internal document that was saying how they wanted to have any AI systems that were getting developed to go and reinforce the Communist Party's values there and not do anything to undermine the value of the state. And over the time since, we've seen other things from the Chinese government that aren't all that great. Like, for example, example, when we saw DeepSeek, get released not all that long ago and have its viral moments, one of the things that it was doing was whitewashing the Tiananmen Square massacre, right?
Right.
So it's not just like an authoritarian regime that's going and advancing and possibly taking over. And what that means, it's also a real big threat to civil liberties and people's free speech. If now all of a sudden we can't find out information through these tools that people are going to be using in the future, because now, things that the powers that be don't want you to see it, so they're just going to remove it outright. I know people have had their gripes about big tech with censorship. At least it was there at some point.
Right.
There was a record of it. And the AI models, if that goes down the way the Chinese want, it's not going to be there at all. You're not going to have anything. You're going to have to look somewhere else, and that's going to be really difficult as we get to an increasingly digital state.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this, James. Hold on. Let me make sure So it's a big brain program with the Chinese Communist Party's values that will make a decision on the precept of from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs in terms of information and communication and access to cyberspace. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the kind of threat that we have here, right? Which is why it is so important that the United States does everything in its power. As David Sachs put it so eloquently, let the private sector cook.
Yeah.
Because if the United States is able to go and manifest that energy in the AI space, we've already seen some really early promising things with AI in the United States. But really, I think this is where the federal standard is going to go and help drive that into the future. So that way, again, our firms can be best positioned to succeed, and then also, by extension, export our AI ecosystem across the globe accordingly.
Sounds good. Well, there you go. Well, listen, James, how do folks find out more about the great work you guys are doing at Consumer Choice Center as a head of emerging technology policy as of yesterday?